Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of Dirty Birds and Brews podcast presented by FanDuel. I am your host, Kevin Knight, joined by Tre'Shon Diaz for another episode of Tuesday Takes. And a lot to get to today. The Falcons introduced head coach Kevin Stefanski for the first time as official head coach. Talked a lot about things that matter, like who's going to call the plays and sort of their plans for general manager. We got a little bit of buzz about the finalists for that position. Got maybe some interesting insight into how they view Michael Penix, some other stuff like that. So it's going to be an interesting show. Obviously, Senior Bowl started today as well. That's why we're giving you guys the late edition of this podcast. So we'll get to a little bit of initial thoughts from Mobile here. But before we get started, Tre'Shon, how are you doing today?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. It was nice to finally get some tangible news out of the organization. We've kind of all been waiting on edge here. They hired Stefanski technically like a week ago, but we finally got the intro, and yeah, like you said, we got some very key nuggets of information about how some things are going to be done next year, and excited to dig into it.
Yeah. So we'll just dive right in, guys. I think the most interesting news from today is the announcement that Tommy Rees, who was probably the least popular of all the coaches they've hired so far, will in fact be calling Atlanta's plays. I know there was, some questioning about how much play calling was he doing last year for the Browns and, what was going on there. He kind of got thrust into it during the season because things were going off the rails in Cleveland. So I don't think we've really had much of a look at Tommy Rees play calling since probably his Alabama days in terms of what he actually wants to do. But the Falcons and Kevin Stefanski clearly seem confident in his abilities. But I think that's probably the most controversial thing the Falcons have done thus far. What are your initial thoughts, Tre'Shon, on that decision?
Yeah, this to me was kind of like when the initial hire happened. I kind of felt like, all right, this is kind of the first speed bump of the process. And I also felt like right away, to me, I was like, I think that Tommy is going to be the play caller. I was kind of already prepared for it. I was like, it feels like Kevin's wanting to show that, he was right for some of the decisions he made in Cleveland. And Tommy Rees is one of those decisions where he feels strongly that this is a guy who can get the job done. While I'm a little apprehensive about the move, he's only 33. The idea that he can't improve and learn and do better with a new cast of characters, isn't impossible or unachievable. I just think that there's for me, a little bit of a sense that this kind of feels like what bringing Zach Robinson back for a third year would have felt like. The best part about what we could say about Rees is that the picture is going to look vastly different. We know he utilized under center. We know he utilized play action. When we talk about those Alabama days, he was able to do a lot, I think, with Milroe. And so, I am excited to kind of see, the offensive philosophy that he's going to bring here. It's just going to come down to the same kind of things that bothered us, I think, with Zach, which is like game flow, in-game management, diversifying the run game, especially when it comes to calling the run plays. I feel pretty good about Rees from a passing perspective. I thought he did a really good job of kind of opening up the Cleveland passing game, especially like vertically. When he kind of took over, we started to see Jerry Jeudy get the ball a little bit more. We saw the tight ends start to stretch the field, and Njoku started kind of getting back to form. And so it feels good because there's similar pieces here where I feel like he can replicate some of those things with. I think that, from that perspective, not really too worried. Something that it kind of been thinking about too is that, Bill Callahan is here. And I do think he's going to have an influence in the run game. And that is somebody that Rees did not have when he was working in Cleveland. And so I think that could be a unique piece to this puzzle. And, at the end of the day, we're just going to have to see if he can do it and if they can get the job done. I don't think it's a horrific hire. And even though he is younger than Zach Robinson, he's technically got more play calling experience than him. So, not much. And the bulk of that came in college, which, for me, I'm not really like going to lean on that too hard. There's a lot of people that are kind of like, well, look what he did in Alabama. And it's like, look what Ryan Grubb did in Washington. Like, it doesn't really matter. It's a different league. Once you're up here, like some of those things that you did at that level don't really matter anymore. It's not really as impressive. So we're going to figure out, I think pretty quickly here if this is the guy, or if Kevin's going to have to, maybe do a little bit more hands-on managing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big thing. Oh, hold on. Maybe you
You're
can't hear
muted,
me.
Kev.
Yeah, I don't know why it
There
decided
you
to
go.
mute it there. Everything. Yeah. Anyway, yes, as I was saying.
Kevin is dealing with the lovely Wi-Fi of Mobile, Alabama. We
Yeah,
should probably
yeah.
mention that up
We're
top.
we're
Don't
just
forget
we're just struggling through it here. I think Reese is a little bit more intriguing, than like the third year of Zach would have been, but I think some, like you said, some of the same concerns are there certainly, and this team really was looking, I think, for a boost on the offensive side of the ball. Now, with Kevin Stefanski in place, you're certainly hoping that his presence can be a stabilizing force for Reese. And obviously, Stefanski's specialty has kind of been the run game and getting that going. And maybe he can kind of complement Reese. Whereas I think Stefanski really wanted to bring in Reese because I think he understood that the passing game concepts he was using were maybe getting a little stale, wanted to kind of modernize and update kind of the Kubiak Shanahan offense that he had been running for years and kind of continue to add more modern philosophies and concepts to it. And I think that's what Rees is trying to bring to the table. And I hope that the collaboration of the two of them can produce good results here. But I think people that are sort of nervous about how that's going to go are justified, certainly. And, we will see how it plays out in Atlanta. But I think there are reasons to be hopeful for a lot of the same reasons that we get hopeful about Kevin Stefanski, which is that the Browns were a absolutely terrible sort of testing ground for any new offensive philosophies, anything really that you're trying to work on or test out. The quarterback play was just, you're trying to throw rookies into this, and Dylan Gabriel didn't really work out. Obviously, Shedeur wasn't much of an upgrade there, although, he did develop a Pro Bowl quarterback, Tre'Shon. Tommy Rees and Shedeur Sanders.
they can't take that from him.
Can never take that away now.
Fifth-round rookies making the Pro Bowl.
Oh, man. Just wild times we live in. Bill Belichick's getting denied the Hall of Fame, and Shedeur Sanders is making the Pro Bowl. We just wild times here. But, yeah, I mean, do you have hope that we can get better results here in Atlanta than they got in their time together in Cleveland?
Yeah, I like the cast, the roster itself is an immediate upgrade for this staff. And so I do think that they're going to be able to work with these pieces and get more out of, even if they were to just come over from Cleveland and we're going to run back that same offense, I still think that they would get a somewhat pretty productive offense, pretty similar results to what they had last year, just from doing that alone. But like you said, I do think that, when you consider that, Stefanski is an offensive-minded head coach, because it's kind of like in this now dealing like, is he really a CEO, or is he really going to be still kind of hands-on focused with the offense and cut Jeff loose on the defense? I don't really see Stefanski getting involved as a CEO and worrying about things on the defensive side too much, but I certainly think that he's going to be drawing up the plays, going through the game script, doing all of the very much of the heavy lifting when it comes to game day preparation for the offense and things like that, and then kind of cutting his OC loose. And that's a very similar dynamic to what Dan Quinn did with his defensive coordinators. Dan Quinn was the defensive guru. It was his defense, but his DCs did call plays, and his DCs still call plays. Like, it kind of burned him last year in Washington. He had to get rid of Joe Witt. And so, that's kind of what I see, taking place here now with Stefanski, is just kind of a very similar model to what was going on with Dan Quinn and his coordinators. And we're just doing it on the other side of the ball now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it certainly can work, but like you said, there are issues too. And Stefanski clearly wants to hitch his wagon to Rees as a guy that he believes in. And at this point, we're just going to have to believe that he's making the right call here. We don't have any data otherwise. The data we do have on him as an NFL play caller is mixed. Like you said, I think at Alabama, I think he did some interesting things there with Jalen Milroe, but we'll have to see how it plays out here. And I think it's not worth panicking over at this stage, but I know some people will, so go ahead, guys, if you need to. But I think they're bringing in like the assistants that you would love to see. Like I have yet to see a decision they've made on the offensive coaching staff that has like made me upset. I mean, Bill Callahan is just an absolute slam dunk offensive line coach, one of the only guys you'd take over Dwayne Ledford, which good for Ledford. He's apparently going to be taking over the Ravens offensive line job. So that's pretty good gig for Ledford. So happy for him.
Nice gig.
Getting to go over there and help out the Ravens now. But like Michael Petrie staying as running backs coach, he's done a phenomenal job with Algier and Bijan. We know Kevin Koger's sticking around, and he's definitely, I think, after coming in, I think we've seen Pitts on an upward trajectory ever since Kevin Koger took over this tight end room. So I think he's been a catalyst for Pitts' success, and maybe a signal that the Falcons are wanting to continue that success in Atlanta. We'll see. But, you know, I think that they kept Nick Jones, who was an offensive line assistant under Dwayne Ledford, so they're keeping some continuity in the staff there. The other big coach to talk about now would be Robert Prince, who I called Robert Price by mistake in my tweet, but it is Robert Prince, guys, who is a very respected receivers coach, was most recently with the Dolphins and has developed a number of Pro Bowl players over there. What do you think about going to now Robert Prince in charge of the receivers? Do you think he'll make it more than 3 weeks in Atlanta?
Yeah, you know, I gotta say, the Robert Prince hire felt like a lot like the Ike Hilliard hire. You're getting a guy that is respected across the league. He's gone to wide receiver rooms, some with talent, some with no talent, and he's churned out good players at every stop that he's been to. So, you know, I think that was a big move. And I think that was, you know, a sneaky addition as well. I think, but you know, Kevin, there's one guy I can't believe you already haven't mentioned him, you know, and that's
I know
that's
I knew I was gonna
teams coordinator.
I know, yeah, we forgot. It was really torturous.
I always
of me
forget
to make you
about
wait to talk about the special teams coach. I know it's just like, you know, it's cruel of me to have not mentioned it. But I know of anyone to bring on, and we should have led the show with the special teams hire. Honestly, you know, that offense. Who cares about that? This is
Where's
a special teams program. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know a ton about him personally, and now I'm drawing a blank on his name too, which is just so embarrassing.
Aukerman.
Yes. Okay, I didn't want to like butcher his last name, but yes. Yeah. I believe he was also with the Dolphins last year.
He was.
And yeah, so I mean, you're the one I would ask about Aukerman. And so I want to know, obviously, what do you think about the Falcons' new direction on special teams?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of hard evaluating some of these guys now based on like the rule changes, right? Because it's like whatever you did 10 years ago is kind of irrelevant because the kickoff rules and so many of the special team rules are so different. When you look at his special teams unit on the surface in Miami, they were pretty much like league average to slightly above. And a lot of the, you know, net yards, return yards, all those categories, good stuff. But they were kind of a sloppy unit, penalized a little bit more than you would like to see. And they did give up some touchdowns in that phase of the game. You know, I would say that this is, you know, just based on results past 2 years, this is an upgrade, I think, you know, from Marquise and you know, unfortunately the situation didn't work out and they needed to move on. But I'm not feeling up. I'm not feeling too, you know, excited just yet. But with these hires and with this part of the game, everybody's still learning. I mean, it's all so fresh. Like the idea that like these guys, in my opinion, you know, I think special teams coaches have really just begun to scratch the surface of how they can coach and take advantage of these new rules. We've only had 2 seasons of these new rules, and they've changed the starting line and touchback lines in between those 2 years. So, you know, we're still dealing with moving parts. We're still learning. I do think that, you know, they brought in a guy that looks like, you know, had his unit on the upswing. When you look at that Dolphins roster, it wasn't a great roster. And so if you don't have a great, you know, group of 1s and 2s, you know, the special teams unit isn't really littered with stars either. So, you know, I think that he did a good job squeezing what he could out of that group because they weren't as talented as the Falcons special teams group was last year.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like it can be hard to evaluate. You know, a lot of times you're looking at a lot of factors, but it does seem for sure like the return game was better for the Dolphins, and that's one area where the Falcons just really struggled. And I'm looking forward to seeing hopefully some more investment on that side of the ball, and really, hopefully, seeing some improvements there. I know in my mock draft I had the Falcons going after a returner in the 7th round, Colin Lacey, who was at the Senior Bowl today, and just kind of moving towards just fixing that side of the ball, because we had issues with the kicking game, we had issues with the return game, we had issues with the coverage. It just seemed like Marquise Williams had kind of lost his way, which is unfortunate, because we've talked at length about how much we both respected Marquise and really appreciated his openness and just willingness to kind of chop it up with the media, and so I certainly hope that he can kind of take some time. And I know he was coaching the Shrine Bowl, so
he's coaching the Shrine Bowl right now.
So
that's
good
an
for him.
awkward situation. I'm wondering how that call came in, just because he's representing the team.
Yeah,
is it just like, hey, just take the patch off your jacket?
Yeah, just rip it. Somebody one of the team guys just goes and just rips it off. But he puts on the NFL cap like Rob Lowe or whatever.
That's right.
But so certainly hope Marquise lands on his feet and can get back in the mix as an NFL special teams coordinator here soon. Some guys just need a little time off to get things back in order. But where do you think we're going to see the most like impact from someone like Aukerman? Does he specialize in any particular area that you know of, or?
No, not that I know of. Like, again, when it comes back to it, like, these rules are so new that I don't know if anybody, you've got like a handful of teams that have kind of been able to dial in being, the knuckleball kicks and things like that. I think his main focus was what pretty much everybody's focus is, step one, which is like, let's try to just be clean. Let's try to stick to our lanes and things like that. And, like I said, they were penalized, but when you look at the fact that, they're not giving up, the most return yards, they're kind of in the middle of all those metrics. They were doing their job for the most part. They were still succeeding with subpar roster, in my opinion. So, I think he's, like a lot of special teams coach, probably just going to be a fundamentalist, really preach, just kind of focusing on doing the right thing, and good things will happen. And, unfortunately last year that message just wasn't getting through. It's difficult when you look at how the Falcons special teams mistakes and things played out, because there's so many things that didn't make sense about what happened last year. And not even just talking about on the field, but something that has still stuck with me is that during Raheem Morris's 2 years, the only player that he ever spoke negatively about, like in a presser and used their full adult name, was Kadarius Hodge. After a Saints game in which there were no special teams mistakes, he benches him, does a complete practice squad or healthy scratch benching, and then the team melts down against the Jets on specialty. Go figure. And so there were so many things going on that it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I think that, I think that there were cultural issues in that locker room. You can't really deny when you look at Ray McLeod having his issue, and then things seem to get weird with Hodge. And so hoping that this is just a guy that can really, the whole staff really kind of keep noise or keep things from like that happening, but just kind of keep everybody focused and dialed in. And hopefully there's not some weird meddling or things going on where we're just going to bench the special teams ace because we maybe didn't like his release on the punt team. I mean, Kevin, I know you scoured that film for any sign of Kadarius Hodge just doing something that, would relinquish a game check, and that we couldn't find anything.
No, I was honestly floored because I thought he actually had a good game. I was like, all right, I'm guessing there's something on here that I just didn't see live, like some egregious error that's probably being overblown, but at least there would be maybe something to point to. Nope, didn't find anything. Yeah. And I don't claim to be an expert, but I thought he had a damn good game. I thought he made multiple plays that were critical on special teams.
That's one of those things where it's
yeah,
feels like something private happened, and we're just gonna go with this in the presser. And yeah, it ended up burning the team, unfortunately, as we know, because you win that Jets game, Kevin, and what happens?
Yeah. Things happen. Now, maybe this is for the best, because you wonder if this is one of those maybe monkey paw curling situations where it's oh, I wish the Falcons could make the playoffs, and then that saves Raheem Morris's job and everything else here. And it's maybe the Falcons were better off getting into this coaching cycle, getting Kevin Stefanski and changing the trajectory of the team than maybe making the playoffs with an embarrassing 9-8 record or something like that, which just maybe wouldn't have been as worth it as we thought. As frustrating as it was. The hope obviously is that the path that the Falcons have now set out on is going to be a better path, and going to be a long-term success path, and not just some temporary minor win in a terrible NFC South where whoever won was probably just going to get waxed by the Rams in the first round. So except for the Falcons and Panthers honestly both beat the Rams. So maybe, one of these teams would actually have a shot. But, the Panthers did play the Rams pretty well in that game. So shout out to them. But that's certainly my hope there, that there was just a lot of weirdness. I really have a hard time thinking like Marquise was behind it. It just doesn't seem like him at all, but who knows? It's everything kind of goes back to the wide receiver room and sort of the mess that was made there after the Ike Hilliard firing. And maybe someday we'll get the tell-all from Ike Hilliard or someone, because that is one of the more fascinating and strange situations I can remember from this football team. But, hopefully that's behind us now. We got a new guy in Robert Prince, and he's, Prince has coached some very good receivers in his time, and the Falcons need it because after Ike Hilliard left, there was no development going on, and that whole room got extremely sloppy. So I hope that the Prince can have a Hilliard-esque impact on this room, because Falcons are going to have to coach some guys up. There's just not a lot of resources here. Can't really see them spending a ton of money on the position, given that they're going to be handing out probably a top-of-the-market contract to Drake London. How many receivers are you paying while you're paying Drake London that type of money? So, but I do think Prince certainly has the pedigree that you could maybe depend on him to develop some of these guys and perhaps, pull in some free agents from his past stops in the league.
Yeah. We'll see, Kevin. There's some familiar faces in the division now too, so it's going to be really interesting, I think, to kind of see, maybe a little bit of proof of concept and understand, what we're going to see that year 3 of Zach Robinson. It's just not going to be in the uniform that some were worried it was going to be in. I think a few people might be happy about the uniform that it is going to be in.
Yeah, we should probably spend a second on that just because it is so noteworthy with Zach Robinson going to the Buccaneers as their new offensive coordinator. And I'm guessing the Bucs were just like, man, this guy kicked our ass twice. He must be a genius. And like his game plans against the Bucs were both very strong. So shout out to him for that. But outside of those Bucs games, if you take those games out, I bet the Falcons' offensive average has dropped sharply. But I think the issue with Zach, we covered it at length, and I tried to explain this to my Bucs coverage friends, and I was asked about him when he was interviewing for the Lions job and stuff, and it's like, look, I do worry that there's some kind of difficult personality with Zach, and that's, you can't really quantify that or put a number on that, but I do have a concern there. And then just the offense is too predictable. He structured it in a strange way for Michael Penix in a way that I think really stunted his development. And the run game was basically entirely carried by Bijan Robinson and just him making it work, but it was not particularly creative. We talked at length about how they just kind of stuck to their guns as 70% outside zone running, and they did, this year they at least incorporated a few duo concepts into things, but it was still just outside zone smash. And Bijan really had to work overtime, and he did, and he succeeded. But I would caution people to maybe think very, very long and hard about how much Bijan Robinson magic was required for this rushing attack to really succeed. And even then, like when you have a running back like Bijan and an offensive line that's supposed to be as good as Atlanta's, you would expect this to be a top 5 rushing attack, and it never really was consistent enough to get to those marks. So just Zach Robinson, one thing I will give him credit for, the red zone offense did get significantly better starting in October-ish, but it just wasn't enough. Third down was so bad, and that's such a critical down in this league that you just can't have third down issues to the level that the Falcons did. I mean, how many games do we see where they converted like a single third down? I mean, it was just, there's red flags with Robinson. He can continue to grow, just like we talk about Tommy Rees growing or Kevin Stefanski growing. Like, these guys can continue to evolve, but what we've seen from Robinson would have given me a lot of pause to hand the reins to him for my team. And the Bucs obviously disagreed and think that maybe the Falcons were holding him back, or a lot of people have decided that Cousins is awful, or not Cousins. Cousins was fine. Penix was awful and was actually kneecapping Zach Robinson's offense because his offense is so good. It's incredible that Penix couldn't succeed in it. But I think if you are holding that opinion, you're probably going to be disappointed with Zach Robinson's output. But I'm not saying Baker Mayfield isn't going to have more success there. I do think Baker's a good fit for what he wants to do, but certainly going to be interesting to see how the Bucs adjust to that, considering they were a very diverse run game, and I do wonder if we're going to see a lot more outside zone, or if that was more of a Ledford thing, and Robinson is open to more diverse concepts. But we're going to learn a lot about what was Robinson and what was these other coaches in Tampa Bay. So it'll be fascinating.
Yeah, I think Zach Robinson was on that Rams staff that rehabilitated Baker, and when I look at this situation, it kind of feels like this is probably who Baker pushed for the most, maybe, out of who was out there. I found it interesting that you use the word maybe, or the phrase that maybe this staff was holding Zach Robinson back or meddling or doing some things like that. And we are going to figure out, because you mentioned it, he's going to have a lot more individual power here than he did in Atlanta, because Todd Bowles is not coming over to that side of the ball, and not like that was kind of one of the things they complained about last year with Gizzers. They were like, all right, there's some things that we need Todd to step up and tell the OC to do, and this, that, and the other. And that's not what Todd does. Todd's not going to be a CEO. He's defensive minded. He's focused on that side of the ball, and he's leaving everything up to Zach. And Zach today, man, made a point in his presser when asked directly about the pistol, because it's such a big talking point. He mentioned that, they did some things, here, and that was around, whatever, with the quarterback, but that he comes from the McVay tree, and he's an under center, marrying the run and the pass via under center. So, a lot of people took that as a jab at Penix, but that doesn't make sense, because again, the pistol did not start with Penix. And that's the thing where I think people keep losing with that argument. The pistol started with Kirk. And I truly wonder how much meddling CEO Raheem Morris was doing, if there was a push for that on his end, if there were things he saw. Zach Robinson always made comments about how the defensive coaches around the league talked about, the pistol is really hard to defend. Well, his own coach is a defensive coach. And it just kind of got my wheels turning a little bit, because I think it was, everybody wanting to jump straight to the quarterback, and they're all jumping to Penix. They're like, Penix trapped us in pistol. But that just completely ignores everything that happened in 2024 when the pistol was unleashed. Kirk Cousins will tell you that Kirk Cousins told us in 2024, he told us in 2025, he can run under center still. There's nothing wrong with it. I still remember one of the first things Kirk Cousins said when he got benched was that he can still play football, and that he is not, like, whatever happened this year with all the offensive setup. He's like, that's nothing. He's like, that's not on me. He's like, I could still play. And Kirk showed us at 25, obviously a little bit more recovery time from the Achilles and everything, but he was doing the under center stuff and everything like that. And so it's a very interesting coaching hire, and it's one that we're gonna kind of get to see develop, and we'll face off against them twice a year. So we will learn a lot.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fascinating one to watch, because Raheem, I think, has been a lot of things, but interceding on the offensive side of the ball, it doesn't seem like something he would do, considering how little he interceded with Jimmy Lake until the end, until way too late in the season. But I am curious to see how it plays out over there. But on the
it's
other
never
side
your fault when you get hired somewhere else.
Yeah.
He's the first guy that got hired, before Raheem did. So he gets to already paint that picture for everybody and be like, look, you guys hired me. Clearly I wasn't the problem.
Yeah. So we're going to find out pretty quickly, I imagine, how much Zach Robinson was or wasn't the problem. Certainly good luck to him.
You could tell Zach was a former quarterback.
Yeah.
Gotta go back to the character thing you were talking about there. It's like, you can tell this guy was a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
before this job.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Well, other side of the ball, the Falcons also announced several retentions, and I know the big one, obviously, everyone was waiting for was Nate Ollie, who's returning as defensive line coach, and um, that was such a night and day difference over 2024. He was clearly one of the most important coaches for this miraculous defensive turnaround, particularly in the pass rushing department, getting James Pierce to 10 sacks, turning around Brandon Dorless almost entirely in one offseason. And Zach Harrison was playing great before he got hurt, and people don't realize like the Falcons were missing like two of their best interior defenders for like the last month of the season. And they still broke the sack record for the team. So pretty incredible stuff. How excited are you to see what Nate Ollie can do with a couple of years in a row here in Atlanta?
Yeah, it's honestly great to finally have, we talked about Jeff getting to come back and the continuity from there, but that really means so much more at the positional level for those guys that are in those individual meeting rooms, on the practice field, everything like that. Everybody's coming in with an understanding of what's expected from them, and they know that if they follow through with this process, it will work. Like they had a year of success. They know what needs to be done, and if they can do it, they have the potential to reach heights they never have before. And so I think being able to have that coach in that room where you can point to his record, you can point to his resume, what he's done, that's just great. And I'm really excited to see what Ollie can do this year. I imagine that we'll see him start to become more empowered as a coach. I think, eventually we'll start seeing that he's going to be, a favorite for defensive coordinator gigs and elevated defensive positional roles. And the Falcons might have to throw a promotion in there before he gets a real DC shot to keep him in-house, because I do think that there will be a lot of senior advisory coaching, VP of defensive,
whatever position you got to make up. Just
whatever
do it.
San Francisco is trying to do with the secondaries coach, a lot of guys are going to try to do that with Nate Ollie pretty soon here. But it's great that he's coming back. And, we know that this is such a young group. So just these younger guys getting to kind of be in the same development plan. Again, just going back to knowing what's expected of them, knowing that this is the guy that they can trust and lean on. It's just great stuff because, the Jalen Walker especially, but James Pierce Jr. too. These guys have not peaked, and we still want to see them reach their full potential. And I think Ali is the guy that can do that.
For sure, I think Ollie is one of the most important coaches on this staff, and so glad they could bring him back. And I know there's a lot of guys that we still haven't heard about for sure. I know Mike Rutenberg is expected to probably join Robert Saleh wherever he's going, which is a loss, but I'm not surprised that he's getting a promotion. And I know Jerry Gray, there hasn't been an announcement one way or the other about if he's being kept, and I know a lot of people assume that means he's not. That's not necessarily true. It just means they haven't officially made a decision, either him or the team, that he wants to return. He could come back, he might not. We'll see. But Justin Hood, you mentioned him. He's, whether Jerry Gray returns or not, Hood will probably be elevated, even more than he was before as that secondary coach, and we'll have to see. I know Dave Huxtable returned as well as like a senior defensive assistant, and it seems like they really value what he's been contributing. So, kind of fascinated. We'll see. I know the Jets have cleared out a lot of staff, so it's possible that the Falcons might go get the coaches that Ulbrich didn't get last time.
Yeah.
From the Jets, and we'll see if anybody else comes over from these other openings, but. That's one of the advantages of being one of the first teams to hire a head coach, is that you get the jump start on all the assistants. So Falcons probably been in talks with a lot of guys about potentially joining the staff, and I'm sure we'll get more announcements over the coming days and weeks here.
Yeah, the Justin Hood one was interesting because I think it almost tipped the 49ers' hand that they're looking really hard at Raheem Morris for their new DC gig. Because it's very, I'm like, well, that's really weird that they would try to fill this position. Robert's gone. They haven't filled DC yet. And I'm like, oh, okay. Kind of feels like dangling the carrot out there, trying to get, Raheem Morris to see if he wants to come down. It'll be interesting to see where Morris lands, if anywhere, this cycle.
Yeah. It seems like it could be Rams. It could be 49ers. It could be a number of spots. So we'll see. But yeah, I would be surprised if he's not somewhere. But yeah, at this point,
You think Shula's in trouble?
I don't think Shula's in trouble. I thought Shula might get hired away somewhere else.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, it seems like maybe at this point it might not happen. But like apparently the Cardinals are pretty interested in Raheem as even like a head coach candidate, which is kind of
Well,
wild to me. But
after everybody kind of
everybody, yeah, the Cardinals and the Browns are kind of like, man, we're really in trouble here. Maybe we shouldn't have
if you
fired
wanted to
Gannon.
feel good about who the league views as the main problem with what was going on in Cleveland, and you and I talked about this, we were like, how the heck is Andrew Berry getting away with it? How is the guy that's been right in the ear of the owner, that's been wheeling and dealing these crazy deals, how has he not gotten any flack? I think a lot of these coaches that are walking into this situation do not really like the working relationship that they would have to have in that building. And yeah, it kind of seems like, oh, okay, maybe the Cleveland Browns are like a bad franchise. Maybe they're volatile. And I know someone's gonna say, well, joke's on you, Tre'Shon. The Falcons aren't a great franchise either. And I'm like, well, you got me there, but we aren't the Cleveland Browns.
There are levels to this, okay? There are levels to the badness.
We're like a special level of bad because we get to the good games still.
Yeah.
We might not do good things in those games, but we can get there, Kevin.
That's right. And we will see how that plays out. But yeah, it seems like Andrew Berry and Brandon Beane are both like the Greener Wormtongues of the NFL, just in the owner's ear all day. Like, oh yes, I didn't draft Keon Coleman. That was the coach. Yes, you need to make sure to fire the coach. He's a herald of woe. He's not welcome anymore. And yeah. If you couldn't tell, I was watching the Lord of the Rings, back in theaters this weekend. So shout out there. That was a good time. But yeah. Tough situations there, and those teams are gonna, except for the Bills. The Bills got Josh Allen, so they'll be able to paper over the ownership and GM issues. But Browns have no such luck, unfortunately, and the Cardinals seem to be struggling as well. So we'll see how that plays out. But speaking of general managers, could be a good segue into the Falcons' own general manager discussion. And it seems like two favorites have emerged in Atlanta. One of them is the guy we've expected all along, Ian Cunningham. The other is sort of a new contender who arrived late to the process, and that's James Leipfert, who was the assistant GM, I believe, of the Texans, and someone that's very well respected and has had a quick rise up in Houston as that team has sort of turned things around quickly. And it seems like those are the two guys that the Falcons are zeroing in on and having second-round in-person interviews with this week. So what do you think about that GM search now that it's entering its late stages here in the process?
Yeah, as much as we can say about these decisions, because we've kind of talked about it, it is hard to fully understand who's responsible for everything, this, that, and whatever in the front office. But from what we know, and from looking at both these guys' resumes, it really does feel like they've come down to, I think, the two best options of the cycle. And you mentioned James Lipford.
I think it's Leipfert, but I honestly have no idea. I don't know how to pronounce two I's next to each other. Yeah.
You mentioned him coming into the picture a little bit late, and I do think that's a great name. The name that was concerning me, Kevin, was Josh Williams, because hearing him talk, I was like, are we sure that Terry and Raheem didn't just do the Dragon Ball Z fusion? Like what's going on here? They posted where he talked about his draft philosophy. It was scary. And then you look at the connections, he works under John Lynch, who drafted John Lynch, Rich McKay, who works closely with Rich McKay on the competition committee board, John Lynch, who would be telling the Falcons that this guy is really good for the gig. They should give him a shot. And so, this was kind of one of those ones where I'm like, I need Matt to put his foot down and tell that old man to get out of the building, go to his new job, go to the fake job they made for you, Rich, and stay there. And I'm feeling good. And I know there's a lot of people pushback. There was a lot of people that seemingly were fans of this. The 49ers had 11 draft picks this year. NFL leading 11 draft picks. There's a 27-man all-rookie team. They didn't have one of their rookies on that. They have been horrific at drafting since 2020. It's not a strength for that group. everybody talks about, well, they get injured and this, that, and the other. And it's like, yeah. And then they struggle really bad because they have no depth, even though they're drafting, they're doing everything they should. They're just not really great at building through the draft. And that's something that we've talked about at length, where it's like, we need a GM who can build through the draft. That is your best shot at improving your roster year over year. And he just did not have a resume that backed that up. I think both of these guys come from backgrounds that support that they believe in being able to build up their teams through the draft. And that's really what mattered most to me. And so I feel like the team is going to get somebody who's able to achieve that. You know, we've talked about it. You can find pro personnel specialists. That's what Terry Fontenot was. That's what he was for the Saints. He was great in that role. And you know what? If you told me if they brought Terry back as a pro personnel guy, I'd honestly be like, all right, well, whatever.
Yeah.
That's what he was born to do. And I don't really see that, though, as being, if that's your calling card as a GM, you're not really worth that much to me, because one, anybody can identify and pay the best player in the league. Anybody can hand out $100 million to Kirk Cousins or $180 million to, you know, whatever. It's who are you getting in rounds 4 and 5? Are they still a part of this team 3 years in? Are they special teams contributors? Who are you getting in? You know, so on and so forth. So feeling really good about these two options.
Yeah, and I thought you were going to say you were terrified of Joe Douglas, which was the scuttlebutt at the Senior Bowl, which was, I don't think I thought Joe Douglas was a serious candidate. I know some people were absolutely panicking. I was like, this is the Falcons throwing Joe Douglas a bone. I also think Joe Douglas is a better GM than people give him credit for.
I think so too.
Still wouldn't necessarily want him as GM, but
there's a lot of TD to Joe Douglas. You know, there's a lot of that there where I'm kind of like, I can totally see Matt liking this guy.
Yeah. But it seems like that was probably mostly a favor. And like, you know, again, he is experienced, and I know a lot of guys like to bring in all these former GMs just to kind of get their opinion on the roster and then kind of talk through everything with them. Certainly Joe Douglas doesn't seem to be in the finalist group, but yeah, I mean, you know, Cunningham is someone, if you're looking at, you know, we've talked about him before, if you're looking at the organizations you want your GM to come up underneath, it would be the Eagles and the Ravens, and the Bears have had this quick turnaround. They've had success in free agency and the draft. Obviously, Leipzig, the Texans are another team that has built through the draft very quickly. We're able to find, you know, whatever you think about C.J. Stroud, certainly had an amazing rookie season and has had that team in playoff contention, you know, year over year, and certainly seemed like a worthy pick at the time, and we'll see how that continues to play out. But you know, Will Anderson, outstanding all-pro pass rusher there. That defense has really become just one of the more dominant forces in the NFL. So I think both those guys have a good track record working under some good organizations. And, you know, I think the draft is where the Falcons really needed to improve. You know, like you said, Terry was a good pro personnel guy, but, you know, I need you to be better at the draft, because that's the best teams in the NFL, you know, they're able to build out through the draft. And I think that's what's keeping the 49ers out of the Super Bowl or winning the Super Bowl, is that they don't have the depth that their teams have. They do have probably the best coaching in the NFL with Kyle Shanahan, and that's why they're consistently so good. But they're just never really able to get all the way there because the roster can't keep up. And you know, hopefully they're able to eventually crest that hill. I know Shanahan deserves a Super Bowl, I think, you know, with how just incredible he is with what he does. But yeah, not sure I would want to sign up for those 49ers drafts. It's just they have so many bites at the apple every year, and they don't really get very far. I mean, it's Kyle Shanahan's running back draft record is really something. That's why they had to trade for Christian McCaffrey. They've traded for all their best running backs. It's like, oh, Christian McCaffrey, Brian Robinson, you know. Yeah, they didn't draft those guys. They had to trade for them.
Those are running backs.
Yeah,
like, come on.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not the hardest position to scout. But yeah, I think I'm excited about both those guys. I think we'll know the GM probably by the end of the week. You know, it seems like they're doing this final round of interviews, but you know, I like the patience. I know they were probably thinking about trying to have someone hired for today, but I think they really wanted to do extra work with Leipzig. You know, I think with Cunningham, it's probably like, okay, this will be like your third interview. You know, there's probably not a whole lot more we have to talk about, but they wanted to get a second look, bring him back in for their interview. So I think being thorough, there's no rush. Like, I know everyone's like, oh, isn't it weird that they're hiring coaches and doing all this without a GM? No, the GM's not in charge of the coaching staff in Atlanta. It's Matt Ryan that's in charge. So, I'm sure they've like talked to these guys and been like, hey, are you cool with Kevin Stefanski? Yeah. He's like, yeah, okay, then great. So.
And Stefanski said he's sitting in some of those meetings and stuff too, but that he is not there to make that decision. He's just there as a part of the process, and just there so that he and the GM can have conversation.
Yeah, which is good. Make sure they vibe on a deep level. That would be good. We don't want, I think it's really important to Matt Ryan that there's a shared vision among all the executives and everyone from the beginning. And then hopefully they'll be able to stay on that path together instead of everybody wandering off in different directions, which is what it's felt like, ever since basically, I don't even know if Arthur Smith and Fontenot were on the same page. I mean, it just from the very beginning, it seemed like there were different priorities and different decisions being made. And hopefully this new regime will be a lot more unified. Maybe it won't, who knows how good it'll be, but at least if they have the same plan, they can be consistent in trying to fulfill that plan. Because for the last several years, we've been kind of like, well, I'm not really sure what they're doing. They're doing some good things and some bad things. I don't really know how it all fits together, but it's interesting. But that'll be the last major domino for the Falcons. They filled their coordinator spots, getting the GM in here, that would be big. And then after that, we're just going to have to see how the rest of the dominoes fall here. There's obviously a lot of important decisions to play out. Obviously, the biggest one is at quarterback, and Kevin Stefanski seemed to pretty much, give a lot of support for Penix as a quarterback that he's really interested in working with. Wouldn't necessarily expect anything else, but I know he did seem pretty, passionate about Penix and like interested in working with him and certainly talking him up as a guy that he's expecting to still be the future at quarterback. But, at this, given that Rees is the OC now, or like, the play caller, and there seems to be at least some level of support for Penix. Have you changed your thoughts on the quarterback position at all? Do you think it's really going to be Penix's show if he's healthy, or do you think they're really going to bring in some significant competition this offseason?
Yeah, it's a lot of it at this point just kind of feels like, boilerplate coach speak, intro presser. We're definitely not going to trash a guy who's recovering from a ripped up knee. Could you imagine? I mean,
I didn't draft that guy,
Yeah, I mean,
that was the other coach. Yeah.
It's pushing Mike around in the wheelchair earlier, actually. But I think I think that Stefanski is not one to shy away from taking on a challenge at the quarterback position. When you look at what he had to go through during his time at Cleveland, even when some moves were done that he personally wouldn't have, wanted to make on his own, he still did what he could to make things work, make things happen. Everything we've learned about Kevin Stefanski from people who were actually inside the building is that he took a lot of one-on-one time with his quarterbacks, including his rookies last year, setting up extra meetings with them, going through things with them one-on-one. I am in full belief that Stefanski is going to be committed in doing whatever it takes to get the most out of the quarterbacks here on this roster. And I also think that in that same line of thinking, he's going to bring in the best available option that he can, in case there is a chance that Penix isn't ready by week one, or if, the team needs to, maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe they walk into a Darnold situation. Somebody starts going off and we're like, okay, we want to maybe redshirt Penix this year. We still got year 4 after this. So we'd have to bite the bullet on that contract if we wanted to cut him loose. So there's a lot of, I think, avenues towards success for that quarterback room. And I'm fully in belief that Stefanski is going to do whatever he can to make it work. He's not here to, I think, make it any harder than it needs to be for the guys that are going to be under center.
Yeah. So we'll see. A lot of it's probably going to depend on how quickly Penix can recover too. I do think there's a solid chance that he's ahead of schedule, given that he is experienced with this rehab far more than a lot of people are. And that may give him may give him an advantage in coming back a little bit on the earlier end of that timeline, which would obviously be great because that means he could be coming back around week 1, but on the late end, probably sometime in October. So we will see how quickly he's able to progress from that injury. That's going to be significant for the Falcons. But the Falcons also aren't going to wait until, August to figure out if he can play. They're going to have to bring someone in at the start of free agency. And, we'll see how that plays out. But it'll be interesting to see just how much they invest in that guy. And that will kind of tell you, I think, how confident they are in Penix and how much they're really wanting to see him when he is healthy this season. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. It'll be fascinating. But yeah, anything else you want to touch on with the coaching staff or the rest of the press conference today, Tre'Shon?
Yeah, one interesting move that I've been trying to do more looking into is the Falcons actually have hired a GM, a former GM, just not for the actual GM job, and it is for a senior advisory role to head coach Kevin Stefanski. And I to me that was very interesting because I don't think I've ever heard of that role before. And I think the one that somebody tried to point me to was I think Leslie Frazier has a job that's somewhat similar with the Seahawks right now. Let's double check that real quick. But Leslie Frazier, he's an assistant of the head coach, so still not necessarily the same thing. But I think it just kind of like went back to what we were talking about with wanting to make sure and maintain that everybody is on the same page all the time. There is going to be a guy being able to represent Kevin in all of the conversations that take place. You can't be two places at one time. So maybe when there's discussions about the roster and with the GM, the coaches, things like that, Stefanski can't get to those meetings. He's got to focus on the product on the field, something like that. This is an interesting role, especially like it being a former GM. That's really kind of why I feel like, okay, this guy is there to be able to translate Kevin's message in terms of like what he's looking for, and then everybody's on the same page. There is no Watson situation. There is no, we're going to draft 2 mid-round quarterbacks this year, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought that, like you said, Matt Ryan is his main focus right now is identity. And I think that in order to do that, in order to achieve that, you have to get everybody on the same page as much as possible. And I think that this is a move that kind of supports that. And it's an interesting role. I'm curious to see if we see other teams start adopting this, or I'm still trying to look and see if there's anything kind of similar to this, or if some of those assistant coaching roles kind of function like this. But that was a move that I just thought was pretty unique and pretty cool, just kind of for like, office structure stuff on the football side of things.
Yeah, the Bob Quinn hire. I know a lot of people were like really salty about it. It's like, he's not the GM. He's just, I don't really think he's going to be involved in like personnel decisions. It's more like he's someone that Stefanski seems to vibe with, and I don't know exactly what the scope of the role will be, but it seems like it's more of an advisory role, and just an experienced guy that's been around the NFL a long time. And I think a lot of younger head coaches, newer head coaches are trying to surround themselves with experience so that they don't, feel so brand new to everything that's going on around the team. And Quinn is certainly a guy that has been around the NFL for a long time. So if he can help Stefanski get settled in and work more efficiently, smarter, certainly all for that. Just don't want him necessarily making any draft picks. That's not his best.
No,
not his best strength.
I don't think he's going to be allowed to be clear, because this is like, I think he's technically, it's technically like a coaching staff role too.
Yeah,
I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure like he's on that coaching staff side of things. So I definitely think, if people are nervous, I do think he's literally here just to kind of be, everybody's got a Grim of Worm tongue, Kevin.
Yep. You gotta have one. It's required.
It's what it's a requirement.
Whisper in your ear. Yeah.
So he just needed his own.
Yeah,
it's great stuff.
Better the Grimmer you know than the Grimmer you don't. So you don't want one to just sort of appear around you. You need to get one that you know exactly what it sounds like. So Yeah, hoping that will be a good setup here for the Falcons. But
this guy and Rich McKay are having the most like diabolical coffee meetings. Like this. They're like,
he's just there to distract Rich McKay. That's his job.
It should be
like,
us.
Oh, Rich wants to
Could you
talk to
imagine what we
Kevin.
would
Okay,
do?
yeah. Okay, Bob, go meet with Rich McKay. Thanks. Just to distract him.
We need you to distract Mr. McKay.
Yeah. He's oh yeah, we got the senior advisor here for you, so
This is your direct line to the head coach, Rich.
Yeah. Go ahead, Yeah. We will. I certainly hope the staff, continues to take shape in a positive way. I've been, it's been an interesting staff building so far. Obviously, the defensive staff, I don't think anyone's upset about any of those moves. Offensive staff a little spicier, so we'll see how that plays out. But certainly excited to see how that continues to develop.
Hit us with your day one Senior Bowl takes, Kevin. To close this out. What popped? Who's popping? Who's not popping?
Yeah. So, Texas Tech nose tackle Lee Hunter will not fall to the Falcons in the second round. You can go ahead and mark that one off because he just ate everyone's lunch today and just embarrassed a bunch. They basically had him go up against double teams because it was like, yeah, we need 2 guys for this dude. And it was still just like, yeah, I mean, every once in a while they would sort of stall him out, but yeah, otherwise it was totally a nightmare.
The third
situation.
guy got in there.
Yeah. Then we need a triple. We need to see how many guys is the turning point there. The quarterback play this year, didn't love it. It's certainly a step down from last year. Diego Pavia is hilarious.
I was like, is that a Diego Pavia height joke, Kevin? The low blow.
He looks like a child. I mean, he's out there next to Lee Hunter, and it's just, man, I seriously fear for Diego Pavia in the NFL, but the dude can sling it. I mean, he was totally fearless out there. He's very fun to watch, but there was some struggles early. It's the first day of practice, so the quarterback wide receiver connections, aren't super great, but definitely some good linebacker play today. The Pitt linebacker was someone I was liking, and Aaron Freeman, was very excited about that. Kyle Lewis from Pitt was playing well in coverage, playing well in run defense. So that was a good fit for him. I know the Clemson edge rusher TJ Parker was awesome. It's the first time I wasn't really paying too much attention to the edge rushers in a long time, but he looked really good. And I thought the secondary, with the quarterback struggling a bit, the secondary was just feasting. They were just out there. All those guys were getting their hands on passes and doing good stuff. So, I thought hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more from the receivers tomorrow because, it was a little disappointing in terms of they're just the catchable passes weren't amazing. I do think Jordan Hudson from SMU was looking pretty good. So I was excited about him. And then I've been watching some of the return guys too. There wasn't a whole lot of full speed returns, but I do like Colin Lacey from Louisville. He, again, small player, but super interesting return specialist. You love to see that. And then the later practice, because these are all afternoon practices now. And it was cold. When it got dark, it got cold as hell. But yeah, American was the night one, and yeah, there was a lot of good stuff there. I thought Auburn's edge rusher, Karen Crawford, looked really good. Just super disciplined against the run. He had a sack, I think, too. But just they were just leaving him unblocked, and he was like, all right. And he just in the backfield. He would just he was very patient with when he got left unblocked. He would sort of just do what he's supposed to do, replace the tackle, and just the running back would just run right into his arms half the time. And it's just yep, I'm here. I know Alabama's Josh Cuevas, the tight end, not someone I've seen at all, but had a great diving catch and just looked more athletic than I was expecting. Was able to get open a few times. The quarterback play was a little bit better in the second practice. We did see some more from the receivers. I know Georgia State, it's Ted Hurst. He ended up catching a pass, going to the ground, kind of off of the body of the defender. That was really fun. Nice. Definitely a lot of good interior defensive line play. Caleb Banks from Florida. Everybody knows how good he is. He's looking healthier out there. I think who was it? Chris McClellan from Missouri. Not someone I'm familiar with really, but he was looking good. Grayson Halton from Oklahoma, another big interior defender. Liked what I saw there. I think Mike Washington Jr. from Arkansas is probably the best running back here. He looked really good. He broke
That's
free
a
a couple
big boy
times.
with light
Yeah.
feet. That
Yeah.
is a big man with like feather feet. He's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
That's
He
like
looked really
man, if you
interesting.
could burn a second on or third, like
Yeah.
on a guy. He's like 228, 6'2".
Yeah. Big boy. So I was in on him. I thought Jaden Knott from Oklahoma also looked pretty good. He got involved as a pass catcher quite a bit. So yeah, it was a good day. Other than being like really cold tonight after the sun went down at like 5 o'clock. That last hour was really miserable. But I think pretty much everyone was getting their feet wet the first day. I did appreciate both practices. Tons of one-on-ones, tons of team stuff. We didn't get any I forget which practice it was. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but there was just one team that was like, we're not going to do anything fun. We're just going to.
That was the I think that was the national last year.
Yeah, they were just like
miserable.
Nope. Yeah, you're getting scraps. All you scouts that are here to watch one-on-ones, we're going to give you like 10 minutes, and that's it. So that's not happening this year. There's been a talking to given to these coaching staffs. I think we know, you guys all know what we're here to see. Okay, so just do it. This is for the players, not you. So, but yeah, it was good practice. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops the rest of the week and getting more eyes on these guys. It's a little bit of a different orientation. It's not so edge obsessed, which I feel like it's been every year for like the past 3 years. It's like, okay, who are the best edge rushers in Mobile? We need to know. A lot more corner wide receiver viewing for me this year, which is nice diversion from all the offensive line, defensive line stuff. So
nice. Well, awesome, man. Can't wait to hear the rest of your coverage while you're there. Hopefully, I don't know if it's going to get any warmer, but hopefully it starts feeling warmer.
Yeah, it'll be like slightly warmer. It'll be like, in the 50s tomorrow instead of like the 30s. So that'll help a bit. But yeah, no, guys, there's definitely going to be more Senior Bowl coming. We're going to try to do a live show if I can get the internet to a stable place. But if not, we'll just do another recorded show for you. But it'll either be Wednesday at the usual time, maybe Thursday. Might just hold off and do like an overall recap on Thursday. But we will keep you guys posted on that. And yeah, before we officially close out, got to bring you guys a word, of course, from our friends over at FanDuel with updates on the Super Bowl odds, which is just a little over a week and a half away now. We know now, of course, that it is the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots, and currently Seattle 4.5-point favorites, obviously neutral field. So yeah, I'm not surprised by that. I think the Patriots have been good, but I think the Seahawks have been great. So we'll see if that plays out. But yeah, Seahawks are a fun team. I'm definitely favoring the Seahawks in this one. Do you have an early Super Bowl favorite, Tre'Shon?
Yeah, I just want to see the Seahawks get it done. I just can't see the Patriots win another ring. Yeah, it's still way too soon. It's got to be like 30 years till they get that next ring.
Yeah.
And yeah, just for the narratives too, just to be able to be like, Sam Darnold won a Super Bowl before Josh Allen. just being able to make those great jokes, being able to get the QB wins argument. It needs this Sam Darnold Super Bowl so bad. Because if Sam Darnold can get that, the QB wins argument is about to just go nuclear. But yeah, definitely pull it for the Hawks.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I think it's gonna be a good Super Bowl, so we're looking forward to that. And yeah, Tre'Shon, anything else you want to touch on before we sign off tonight?
No, I think we've covered it all. Definitely excited to just kind of see, what the Falcons intend to do with the GM position moving forward. Hopefully we hear about that by the end of this week.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, guys, thank you so much once again for tuning into Tuesday Takes on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast, presented, of course, by FanDuel. And, of course, want to thank my co-host, Tre'Shon Diaz. He's at Trey3Sean, also Tre'Shon.io. All Trey Phases on YouTube is his channel. And I'm, of course, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. If you haven't liked and subscribed yet, well, please do that. That would be really cool of you. Trying to get to that mythical 10K subscriber number. We're inching closer. We're I think getting close to the 9,300s now. So maybe by the draft, we didn't quite hit it by the end of the season, but it was close enough. I think we're in shooting distance, for the draft. So you guys can help us do that. Also, if you're a podcast enjoyer, hit us with that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. It's very helpful. Like I said earlier in the show, we will be back either Wednesday night for the typical live, or we'll just do one on Thursday perhaps. Might just do that so we can get you guys like all the Senior Bowl stuff all at once, because I'll be traveling Friday, so won't be able to recap it for several more days. So it might make more sense to wait till Thursday, but we'll see. Might try to get Aaron Freeman on because he's here as well for that. Get that collab show for you guys. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching, listening, all that good stuff. If you want to support the show, you can do so on Patreon, patreon.com/FalcHawkLive. Also the YouTube channel memberships. But other than that, guys, thank you so much. Please stay warm. Hope you've all weathered the winter storm okay. I know it was pretty hairy in Texas and a lot of the South. Thankfully, it seems like Atlanta avoided the freeze. I was able to fly through there on Monday without too much trouble, thankfully. But Syracuse just got a bunch of snow, but that's okay. That doesn't bother us that much. But I heard New York City got the snow and ice, which is terrible, of course. But hopefully, you guys stayed warm. Hope everything's good with you, and we will, of course, check in with you guys again later this week to get our final Senior Bowl thoughts and maybe to talk about the GM hire whenever that comes in. So until then, guys, thank you so much for joining us on the Dirty Birds and Booze podcast. Have a great night, folks.